Well, good morning. I'm Walter Mellon, the CEO and founder of the Pesticide Broadcasting Network, affectionately known as PBN. We hope that you can tune into our station on a regular basis so that we can provide you with information you can use to keep yourself safe around pesticides. Now, sit down and enjoy our regular daily programming.
On the next exposure bloopers and blunders. The start of spring. A busy time making preparations when winter's cool weather is still in the air. It's a scene we've all witnessed a dozen times, applying chemicals to a grape vineyard. But what's this? Oh, look at this guy. Oh, he's wearing his PPE all right. But to keep warm, he's added a baseball cap, a bandana, and a hooded sweatshirt. Absorbent clothes like these are a no-no for pesticide applications, unless they are totally covered up by a chemical-resistant suit. Oh, and to boot, he tucked his suit pants into his, boots. Looks like both he and the vines will get a sufficient dose of spray today. Now that's not just a blooper, but a real blunder. Join us next week for exposure bloopers and blunders. It's time for PBN News. Tonight, join Beth Benign and Hugh Hydrate and our intrepid roaming reporter, Brick Walls.
Good day, fellow applicators. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, it's good to see you. Hugh, what's our top story today?
Our top story is a tale of pesticide exposure. A spray applicator was wearing a sweatshirt and ball cap under his personal protective suit. Unfortunately, he did not cover the sweatshirt and hat, and they became contaminated, resulting in a continuous source of pesticide exposure that sent him to the hospital.
Let's join our roving reporter, Brick Walls, with an in-depth report on this latest pesticide exposure incident.
Thanks, Beth and Hugh. As you know, if people are not careful around pesticides, they could have a pesticide exposure incident just like this one. I have with me Adam Schauer, an emergency medical technician, to discuss the hazards of pesticide exposure. Hi, Adam.
Hello.
So, who's vulnerable to pesticide exposures and what are the risks involved?
Anyone who handles, transports, or applies pesticides. Mixers and loaders are at the greatest risk of exposure since they handle the concentrated product. Mishaps and poor judgment can lead to exposure to your lungs if you breathe pesticide mist or vapors. Your eyes if you touch them with dirty hands, your skin by spray or dust, and your mouth, usually by contact with contaminated hands. Some exposure can cause illness, injury, and in severe cases, even death.
Whoa, now, slow down for the folks at home. Are you saying if I handled pesticides and didn't take the proper precautions that I could, say, get a rash or get sick or have trouble breathing?
Yes, all those are possible problems that can result from exposure. In fact, you can have either acute or chronic effects.
Acute or chronic effects?
That's right. Acute health effects are short-term, immediate symptoms brought on by sudden exposure events and the body's rapid reaction to the pesticide. Acute means illness or injury that can result from a single exposure. They can also contribute to long-term persistent conditions. Chronic health effects result from prolonged or repeated exposure over a long period of time, usually months or years. Low-level exposures may not cause immediate effects, but can still contribute to long-term problems, especially if the exposure occurs over a long period of time, even years and years. Some of the potential chronic ailments could be neurological disorders, vision problems, or cancer.
Ooh, that's not a happy thought.
No, it is not, but there is a lot the pesticide handlers can do to reduce their chances of exposure. In fact, I recommend that you talk to Bertie Covington from the EPA. She's coming this way now.
Miss Covington, can I ask you a few questions?
Well, I need to get inside, but sure, I've got a moment.
Oh, thanks for your time. It seems like pesticide applicators are especially vulnerable to exposure. What would you like people to learn from this incident?
I'm glad you asked. There are many precautions that people who work around pesticides can take to prevent exposure. In fact, both applicators and employers need to understand the risk and the ways to prevent exposure.
Oh, okay. What are the ways to prevent exposure?
It's just like a hazardous material cleanup team. It's their PPE.
That would be personal protective equipment, right, Bertie?
Yes, that's correct. Proper selection, use of maintenance of personal protective equipment are the first line of defense. Always check the pesticide label to see what type of PPE you need. The label states the minimum required PPE.
So it's important that people read and follow the pesticide label warnings. It's the law and they're there to protect them.
Of course. People can decide to wear even more for added protection. Can you imagine someone not wearing their PPE or not having it fit or not using it correctly? This is a big problem with any type of PPE. Just like the incident today, the applicator did not wear his PPE correctly and allowed pesticides to get in his sweatshirt and ball cap. These clothes remain in contact with his skin. PPE decontamination is another area of concern. Applicators need to think about the potential for acute and chronic exposure every time they work around pesticides. They need to put on clean PPE and wear it properly. When the job is done, they need to decontaminate their PPE and wash themselves. Contaminated PPE really increases your risk of exposure.
Well, thanks, Bertie. Beth, Hugh, it appears to me that any farm, nursery, landscaping, or other businesses that use personal protective gear should adopt a PPE policy on its selection, use, maintenance, and decontamination. All employers need to train their employees on the policy and make sure that they follow the rules at all times. For people working in agriculture, the Federal Worker Protection Standard has requirements for PPE use and decontamination. Remember what PBN says: safety is everyone's business. Back to you in the studio.
Thanks, Brick. Well, that's it for our pesticide report. Stay tuned for further updates.
Please continue watching our PBN regular programming. I say we're dang good. Yes, we are. And you just look so swell.
Thank you so much.
I just love this job.
Welcome to Handler's Feud, the toughest competition among pesticide handlers on network television. You all know how the show works. We survey 100 pesticide handlers across the country about pesticide decontamination. Their top answers are listed on this board. Get the most popular answers and your score goes up. Get the highest score and you win. It's that simple. On the right, we have the red team. Team Captain Bill is a turf and ornamental applicator. Jed is a mixer loader. Becca is a grower, and Tim is a right-of-way applicator. On the left is the blue team. Team Captain Tina is a pest control operator. Bob is an equipment maintenance worker. Steve is an aerial applicator, and Alice is a city park employee. Let's get started with the blue team. Are you ready?
Yes. We are, yes.
Such enthusiasm. All right, you all know how this works? Let's get started. The question for you is, what adverse effects might humans experience when exposed to a pesticide? Tina, what do you say?
Oh, an itchy rash, Tony.
Sounds like you speak from experience. 100 survey said, itchy rash, 22 points.
Hey, good job.
All right, Bob, what say you?
Well, I know people can die, but usually it's just that people get pretty nauseated, and your eyes, nose, and throat may become irritated. So I bet most people said vomiting.
Well, aren't you the life of the party? Survey says, vomit. All right, Steve, what adverse effects might humans experience when exposed to a pesticide?
All right, blurred vision, headache, even fatigue could be effects of exposure. I'll guess headache.
Boy, don't those sound like a good time. All right, survey says headache. You're on a roll, blue team. No pressure, Alice.
Right, no pressure. All the good ones have been taken. I gotta think here. Oh, Okay, I'm sweating bullets. That's what it is, perspiration.
Survey says excessive sweating. That's a clean sweep, people. Nice work. Right. So the last question dealt with adverse effects, but more specifically, the answers were acute adverse effects from pesticide exposure. Remember, pesticide exposure can cause both acute effects, those that happen right away, and chronic effects, long-term health effects. Well, the blue team just aced their challenge. Let's see how the red team does. All right. The first question for you is, what do pesticide handlers do with their unwashed hands that can lead to pesticide exposure? Bill, let's start off with you.
That's easy. Eating.
Survey says eating. Very good. Jed, you're next.
Going to the loo.
The Louvre, as in France?
No, relieving oneself.
Oh, survey says hit the can. Nicely done, so to speak. Becca, what do pesticide handlers do with their unwashed hands that can lead to pesticide exposure?
How about answering their cell phone?
Answering phones. Wow, nobody thought of that one. But I bet that happens a lot nowadays. Tim, give me another one.
How about rubbing your eyes?
Rubbing eyes. Survey says you hit the bullseye. Just out of curiosity, let's see what the last answer was. Survey says, ooh, scratch and itch. Sorry, red team, but blue team is ahead. Sounds like there's an easy way for pesticide handlers to avoid pesticide exposure. Along with wearing your PPE, wash your hands. Blue team, are you ready? Before we continue, let's hear a word from our game show sponsors.
Each contestant gets a home edition board game of Handler Feud. Challenge your entire family to a rousing quiz.
All right. What areas can you contaminate if you don't properly wash your hands?
Your eyes, your face, neck, glasses, sleeves, pants, iPod, cell phone, your food.
That's enough, Dad. Okay, my turn. When should you wash your hands?
Before you eat is all I can think of. Let's take a look at the card.
Before eating or smoking, if you happen to touch any equipment used to apply pesticides while not wearing gloves, after removing your personal protective equipment, or before getting into any type of vehicle or closed cab where pesticide residues may be present. Or before going to the toilet. I can't believe it. The little dweeb's right. It's the last one listed.
Okay, that's my dweeb.
Oh, a dweeb.
Okay, where should decontamination supplies be located?
That's easy. Where they mix stuff, in the field where they spray, where people work in the fields, where they take breaks and eat lunch, and where they clean their gear and equipment. And don't forget the porta potties.
You too can be a decontamination expert with the help of Handler Feud Home Edition. Now back to the show.
Well, I know you'll all love playing the Handler Feud Home Edition. Blue team, are you ready?
Ready.
Let's go.
Okay, Tina.
Come on, Tina.
What should you do if you get pesticides on your skin?
Got it. Wash.
Survey says wash. Bob?
Get away from the pesticides.
Yeah.
Seems reasonable. Survey says leave the area.
Great.
Steve. What should you do if you get pesticides on your skin?
Remove the contaminated clothing. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
Survey says remove clothing. Alice, what do you say?
What would I do if I had pesticides on my skin? I don't know. Gosh, I think I'd ask my supervisor.
Survey says... Wow, it's not there. Incredible. Well, that really leaves the door open for red team. Roll that last answer and see what they missed.
Oh, can't believe we missed that.
Well, that was a nice review of first aid procedures of a pesticide exposure. Don't forget to read the label, because there's very important first aid information on every pesticide label. Okay, red team, it's your chance to win. We asked 100 pesticide handlers, what are the sources of pesticide contamination where you work? Bill.
Sprayers.
Survey says... Sprayers! Jed.
Personal protective equipment.
Survey says... PPE.
Good job.
Let's see, irrigation equipment. No, wait, I have a better one. Tractors.
Survey says... We have tractors. Tim, one left. What are the sources of pesticide contamination where you work?
Where most of the pesticides are stored, the storage area.
Yeah, good one.
Survey says...
Yeah, very good. That's good.
Storage area. I'm sorry, blue team, you've done a fine job, but our champion for today is the red team. Be sure to join us tomorrow for another rousing game of...
It's time for a PBN News Update, live and in your face. Your one and only source for hard-breaking pesticide news.
We're interrupting our regular programming to bring you this special PBN News Update.
Yes, as a follow-up to this morning's pesticide exposure incident, our reporter, Brick Walls, is reporting live from Valley Hospital, where a pesticide applicator who was not wearing his PPE properly is currently being treated from massive acute exposure to an insecticide that had a label bearing a skull and crossbones. Give us an update, Brick.
Thanks, Beth. This is Brick Walls reporting live from Valley Hospital. The patient is undergoing medical treatment right now for pesticide poisoning. Meanwhile, I would like to share the importance of using and cleaning your PPE adequately.
Mommy?
As you can see, the correct use of personal protective equipment is not a matter to be taken lightly. Wearing your PPE correctly and wearing it properly is not any different than using a helmet when riding a motorcycle or a seatbelt when riding in a car. If you don't want to be the subject of our news report, use it carefully and care for it.
Brick, when I'm in surgery, I always use my PPE correctly. After surgery, I either sanitize it or I dispose of it. I sure don't want to be exposed to germs, nor do I want my staff to be exposed to my patient's germs or my patients to be exposed to my staff's germs. You sure wouldn't want me to go from patient to patient without decontaminating my PPE. Pesticide handlers and applicators should always decontaminate their PPE. If they don't, they will be exposed and could also contaminate others, including their families.
That's right, Mommy.
Well, thanks, Doc. So remember, treat your PPE like the lifesaver it is. Wear it properly to protect from exposure. Remove and decontaminate it carefully. Lastly, store it properly.
Mommy, did you steal my Jell-O?
Thanks, Brick. Well, that's all the time we have for now. Stay tuned for more investigative reports.
Goggles, goggles. We've got goggles, hundreds of them. Of course we do, because we're the Goggle Warehouse.
Do you have pizza?
No.
Do you have canned ham?
No, we have goggles. Thousands of them. Goggles for every occasion. We have formal goggles, stylish goggles, sports goggles, and even baby goggles.
Baby goggles?
That's right. Baby, do we have goggles. Millions of them. Our special this week is pesticide application goggles. You know the ones. No holes in the side. Just a secret special airflow that keeps sprays and dusts out. Read your pesticide labels to see if they say to use goggles. Baby, we got those goggles.
You gotta wear them or go blind.
And it's the law for some pesticide products, so get yourself down to the Goggle Warehouse and we'll even throw in an anti-fog cloth absolutely free.
All claims of blindness not supported by scientific research. But we've seen it happen. Trust us.
We're just googly for goggles.
Today, host Sadie Blue will show you how to make an effective decontamination site without spending lots of money.
That's right. As many of you know, the federal government has requirements for decontamination under the Worker Protection Standard for agriculture and state OSHA requirements. Fortunately, they don't discourage do-it-yourself or alternatives to the more pricey decontamination sites. Some states have their own regulations which are more stringent than the federal Worker Protection Standard for agriculture. So keeping this in mind, our roving decontamination unit designer Doug Trimble will show you how to make a sensibly cheap decon unit that complies with most state and federal rules. Doug?
Thanks, Sadie. As you can imagine, there are many ways to meet these requirements. Some stations are portable sites, while others are permanent. Some station sites are quite elaborate, while others sufficiently get the job done. There are lots of locations where a decontamination site should be set up, or at a minimum, places where decontamination supplies must be located. Can you ever imagine an accident occurring in a storage area? Or while making an application? How about in or around a service vehicle? These are prime locations to place a decontamination unit. The Federal Worker Protection Standard requires that decon sites be within 1/4 of a mile from agricultural employees. But no matter what business you're in, if you use pesticides, you should have a decon site nearby. So what's needed? Water, soap, towels, and clean coveralls. Looks like a simple water jug could cover the water needs, but if you don't want to be sensibly cheap, you can build something. The rules simply say soap, but I talked to the experts and they suggest liquid soap. So, to be sensibly cheap, I'm going to use plain old dish soap. Single-use towels are always cheap. Says here in the Worker Protection Standard, employers must provide each handler with at least 1 pint of emergency eye flush water when the pesticide label requires goggles for eye protection, and the eye flush water must be immediately accessible. An emergency eye wash station is easy to do on the cheap as well. Plumb an eye flush unit with running water for any permanent eye station. If running water is not available, buy some portable pint-sized eye wash containers or have the person carry a pint of clean water. Now, is that sensibly cheap or what? People buy water that's more expensive than gasoline, so we're not talking about big investments. Last item, clean coveralls. You can probably even find a pair at a thrift shop or secondhand clothing store. Don't worry if they're permanently stained. They're clean if they're washed. If someone's exposed, they can strip off their clothes, have a good wash and rinse, and have something clean to put on.
Thanks, Doug. Of course, a good decontamination plan can't help you if you don't use the equipment correctly. Until next week, remember to be sensibly cheap.
Gina, have you ever seen anything so terrific?
No, Jack, a talking toaster and only for $19.95. Oh my goodness, it looks like we sold out.
Well then, let's take a look at our next product, shall we?
Oh yes, here it is, a Magnum Steel 006.
That's incredible. I can't believe it. I didn't know these things still existed.
That's right, Jack. We found a box in a warehouse, but we only have 5,000 of them. So act fast and buy now.
Speaking of fast, here we have our first caller.
Hey there. I don't want to rain on your parade, but isn't that just a plastic disposable razor?
Well, it's a Magnum Steel 006. State of the art, sharpest still on the planet.
I just bought a dozen of those at the dollar store. I use them to shave before I put on and seal check my respirator. I'm a pesticide applicator, you see.
Looks like we lost that call. What a shame. I heard he was going to buy a dozen of them, and for only $19.95.
Jack, I'm still here. Like I was saying, if you have a beard, stubble, or long sideburns, and you decide not to shave before wearing your respirator, you risk a bad seal between your face and the respirator. That means pesticide vapors can leak through and get in your lungs.
Interesting. So what you're saying is this little object can save your life. So how many of these Lifesaver 006 razors can we send your way? 2 dozen are only $29.95 while supplies last. Buy some for your furry friends.
Thank you for joining us once again. It's time for a PBN News Update, live and in your face.
Hello, and welcome to the final segment of our special Pesticide Exposure Edition.
Always the intrepid reporter, Brick Walls, has an intriguing investigative report.
Thanks, Beth. I'm Brick Walls at PBN News. It suddenly dawned on me in my recent visit to Valley Hospital that I didn't know the proper steps that pesticide applicators need to take to remove and decontaminate their PPE. So, as a public service, we at PBN News have decided to create a 12-step program. Not that 12-step program. This program illustrates the proper techniques to remove, decontaminate, maintain, and store your PPE. We like to call it the Dirty to Dirty and Clean to Clean program. In other words, you only use dirty gloves to take off dirty PPE and clean gloves only to touch clean clothing. Step 1. Rinse off your entire chemical-resistant suit with a hose or shower head to remove as much pesticide residue as possible. Step 2. Remove your hood or headgear by grabbing it from the outside contaminated part. Step 3. Carefully remove your goggles or eye protection with your contaminated gloves. Make sure you do not touch your face with your dirty gloves. Keep in mind that wearing dirty goggles while removing the rest of your PPE can reduce your vision and increase the risk of potential contamination. Step 4. Take off your respirator by grabbing it from the canister or cartridges and gently pulling it forward and up. It's easier to remove the respirator by pulling it forward and up than it is to unhook the straps. Wearing a respirator while removing other PPE can restrict movement and vision. It's much more comfortable to remove other PPE parts without wearing a respirator. Step 5. Take off the jacket by carefully unbuttoning or unzipping it without touching your clothing underneath. Once the jacket is opened, wash your gloves and jacket sleeves with soap and water. Carefully remove your jacket by grabbing it from the clean parts. Step 6. Remove your protective pants. Unhook the pant straps and make sure to drop them inside the pants to avoid contamination. Roll your pants down to slightly above knee high. Balancing carefully or using a chair, remove your leg from the dirty protective pants. Then put your foot back into the boot. As a special note, put your everyday pant leg back into the boot. It's highly recommended to wear rubber boots while washing PPE to prevent work shoes from contacting contaminated water. Step 7. With your boots and gloves still on, wash and dry your goggles and put them on. Or put on other clean protective eyewear. With your eyes protected, start washing the rest of your PPE.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Brick. The PPE removal process sounds pretty involved. Do all pesticide applicators have to be that careful?
To make sure they're safe, they do. Let's move on to the next step. Step 8. Wash your respirator. Remove the cartridge from the mask. Discard and replace any pre-filters. And discard cartridges that were used for more than 8 hours. If you can reuse the cartridges, clean them by wiping with a moist towel. Dry cartridges with single-use towels and store them separately in a sealed plastic bag. Take the respirator apart and wash with soapy water using a soft sponge. Rinse it under running water. Let it air dry or use single-use towels. After parts are washed and dried, make sure you inspect them before reassembly. Store in a sealable plastic bag, separate from the cartridges. Step 9. Now you finally get to wash your protective suit. Wash your suit both inside and out on a flat surface. Using a brush, scrub with a side-to-side motion with soapy water to avoid splashing contaminated water on your clothes or body. Don't brush towards you. Using the side-to-side technique helps you avoid being splashed with contaminated water. Rinse the suit under running water and hang it to dry in a clean, pesticide-free area. Step 10. While wearing your boots, wash them. Step 11. Remove and wash your goggles with soap, water, and a soft sponge. Step 12. With them still on, wash the outside of your gloves. Remove them now and wash the insides as well. Fill the gloves with water and check for any holes. Even if you are wearing disposable gloves, wash them before disposing of them. Inspect all PPE and replace or repair any that need it. Finally, when you're done with your 12-step dirty to dirty and clean to clean program, move to a pesticide-free zone. Take your boots off and put on your regular shoes.
That's a 13th step, Brick.
What?
That's a 13th step.
Listen here, Mr. Fancy Pants. Someday when you're covered in pesticide residue and yelling for help, I'm sure you'll be begging for the 12-step program. Are we clear, Mr. Perfection?
Brick, During the decontamination process, I noticed you mentioned some decontamination supplies. What items are needed and who provides them?
Now that's an excellent question, Beth. These are the decontamination items people need to have on hand. A flat surface, plenty of water, soap, a brush with a long handle, a sponge to wash goggles and respirator, single-use towels, 1-gallon Ziploc bags to store respirator, goggles, and gloves. Your employer usually makes these supplies available. Now back to you, Beth, and Mr. Fancy Pants. Jerk.
Thanks, Brick, for that in-depth report. To summarize, here's Brick's 12-step program.
Yes, Beth, here is Brick's 12-step program. 1. Rinse PPE. 2. Use dirty gloves to remove dirty hood or hat. 3. Use dirty gloves to remove dirty goggles. 4. Use dirty gloves to remove dirty respirator. 5. Use dirty gloves to unbutton dirty outside jacket. Then wash gloves and jacket sleeves to remove jacket, grabbing it from clean parts. 6. Remove your protective pants using clean gloves to touch clean parts of pants. 7. Wear clean eyewear. Start washing PPE. 8. Wash respirator. 9. Wash your protective suit. 10. Wash your boots. 11. Remove and wash goggles. 12. Wash your gloves.
When you're done, move to a clean area to change into your regular shoes. Now back to our regular programming.
All of us at the Pesticide Broadcasting Network are concerned for your welfare. So remember to wash your hands often, especially after working with any kind of chemical. It isn't hard. Use plenty of water, some good old-fashioned soap. Use disposable towels to dry off. Make sure you rub your soapy hands for at least 15 seconds before rinsing off. So wash your hands often and properly, and we'll continue to be your #1 decontamination station.
This has been a concerned message of the Pesticide Broadcasting Network.